not add that in. So I'm going to actually move me over to this corner instead. And that should be a little easier looking. I'll make sure it goes through first. All right, I moved on my screen. So that means it moved on your screen. Hey everybody, BTO Pro here. This is another HAX live stream. So this week, it's been a while since we've done these, going to be looking at internationalization, or abbreviated as i18n. So more specifically, i18n in web components. So you might be familiar with internationalization in other projects or in applications you've built. It's a little weird the way that we're trying to go about doing this. If you're familiar with HAX or HAX the Web, you can check out haxtheweb.org, and you'd know that our project is actually lots and lots of little projects. So what we're doing is, in effect, shipping you not just a next button that's part of some application, we're shipping you a site menu button that can work anywhere, regardless of if you're on this website. So we're not compiling an application, we're compiling all the little pieces. All right. So I put up an article, series of articles on dev.to. This will end up getting added as the 5th post that gets really in the weeds about this, but I feel like the most effective way to see internationalization and trace this is to actually watch it in a live project. So our code is here at github.com/elmsln/eller web components. What you are going to see is slightly ahead of where we have published NPM releases. So these will be in the next published releases. The reason for that is there's a major overhaul to HAX UI layer, which is also going to be demonstrated today for the first time. So let's fire up the i18 manager so we can see what this is and how we're internationalizing things. So I'm going to open that up. This is using our WC Factory based mono repo. So we end up doing yarn start and a whole bunch of repos so you can actually see them change and review them. But so there's two primary pieces of this. One is the manager, right? We need something that's going to actually be able to manage this process. For that, we went with a singleton. So if you're unfamiliar with a singleton, what that looks like as far as code, we end up with something that sits as a singular concept in the DOM. So for us, we like to align that with a class of a JavaScript file, and a class relating directly to a globally accessible instance of something. So you can hit this via window if you wanted. And that when this file gets referenced in our toolchain, it automatically is going to add this to the page. So what happens is this file gets referenced, pulled in somewhere else, whether that's in our mix-in, which we'll go through as well in some implementations, or just directly referencing this. By referencing the file, this is going to run request availability in order to form this constant. So this constant's exported, you can pull this in, it's the store. Think of this as a store just dedicated to internationalization. It has no other purpose in our application. So it's going to request availability, which is going to see, do we have an instance of this? No, we don't have an instance. So we're going to make an instance of ourself, weird concept, and then we're going to append ourself to the body of the document. Then we're going to return that instance. So with this little snippet here, we do this with a couple other singletons, we are effectively able to guarantee one copy of the manager for this specific concept. So in the past where we've used this is modals, dialog boxes, toasts, right? Think of anything that wants to request to show you like a little pop-up message. I want to make sure there's only one pop-up. And then I want a whole bunch of stuff to use the pop-up. But this stuff doesn't know that the pop-up is there. I know, it's weird. So what the manager is doing is it's ensuring that it is in charge of all the things that Karen can't do. That's not what it is. It's in charge of internationalization. Come on, liven up. It's a Wednesday here. So in the index, here's our demo that we have. I'm going to show what it does in a second visually. But we have a little tiny selection changer here. So all this is doing is going to toggle what the language is. Right? So if we see what the language change does, is when language change is called, I'm going to call request availability just to make sure I have access to that thing. Then I'm going to set the language to whatever the thing gets changed to. Now, when we default, I make sure that the language of the document is implemented and set to our little changer, right? So this is not for any sustainable purpose. This is purely for local development, demonstrating the concept, making sure this works across lots and lots of projects. So looking at changer, right? It's just a little select list that's going to have all these options. Then in the page, we've got a bunch of things. We've got simple login camera, which is not going to load as a camera. You'll just see this little gray square, word count, and self-check. So these are three separate elements. We'll step through how they integrate with the manager in order to do internationalization. But let's see what the end result is first. So I go to my little manager demo, and you'll see that it's defaulting to Japanese. Now, the reason it's defaulting to Japanese is because on the body, the body has set language JA. Now, if I set the language to yes, save, it's going to be in Spanish. Now, what's happening there is it's not just setting this to Spanish. These elements are communicating with an invisible element on the page, our singleton. So if we look at elements in context, there should be i18n manager. There it is. So an invisible element in the page that is just in charge of this concept of state management. So it's saying right now we're on Spanish. Now, if I was to change this little select box from Spanish to Japanese, we'll see that toggling this automatically is changing this little hidden value. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is you saw this get translated in real time. So that's translated. This one's translated. This little button's translated. What is not translated is this text. So we're not talking about this currently. This is user-entered text for this element. I'm talking about anything internal to the web component that has language associated with it that can be translated. So if I go to Spanish, we'll see this one translates. Go to French, this one doesn't translate, and this does. And this one I don't believe will. Yep, so that's back to English. And then also the ability to go to like a variation or dialect of language, right? So this says word count, and this says reveal truth, and this says exit. Not that those are required ways you would say that in the UK. It's mostly for demonstration here. So, and you can see now it goes back to close. Okay, so what's happening is these elements are indicating to the manager that they have something that can be translated. And then they are in lockstep with that. So when the manager is told, hey, now we're all speaking Spanish on this page, it's going to check in with all of the elements that said they speak Spanish too, and it's going to tell them, hey, now it's time to speak Spanish. So let's see how that actually plays out. So there's nothing on here that's indicated. It's just there's simple login camera, and we have a camera or a self-check. So let's do self-check for starters here. I believe I have self-check open. There it is. Okay, so what does an integration look like in order to make this be internationalized? So in your element, we're going to have locales directory. And in locales, we'll have very simple JSON blobs. So I've got a reveal, close, more, and then it has what those labels should be. Now, if I go to Japanese in this case, and I don't know Japanese, just to make sure we're perfectly clear. I took these strings, I pasted them into Google Translate so that I can illustrate that this concept works. Eventually, we will have people correctly translate these things as opposed to whatever Google happened to say. So we're on the same page there. So self-check needs to tell the manager, hey, if we're all speaking British English, then this is the way to present the strings internal to my element. So the way that happens, and the blog post, as I've written it up, has a bunch of different ways that we went about trying to review this, what the best option is. But this, I think, is the best. It's the simplest user experience for the easiest gain. So I've got an i18n mixin. What I can then do is I've imported this. It's a superclass that I mix into other things. By mixing this in, I'm basically making them aware of all the concepts required to work and be effectively translated. So the next thing I need to do is I need to supply a this.t. And the this.t variable is going to have a very basic object that's just a reference to whatever the string is. So in this case, I have reveal and then answer. Now I can make these whatever I want. In HAX, it would probably be more like this because I try to keep it just the camel case edition of whatever the text is. But so I've got reveal and then reveal answer and close, right? So think of these as like my language defaults. Then I need to register translation. So by calling this.register translation, which is something that came in from the mixin, you have to, if you want your element translated, supply context this, and then a base path. And the base path is basically this import.meta.url is sort of like a magic command, but it is built into JavaScript to say to the browser, where am I? Like, where is this file loaded from? So no matter where this file is loaded from, that's what that variable is going to be. I need these two to be fired from inside of self-check. Otherwise, I will have no idea where this file is located. It's very important. Then I need to say, what translations do I support? So I can add support for more translations. I actually will as part of this video. But for right now, it's saying EN, UK, and JA. Now, this act right here, whenever the manager changes what the language is enough to go and grab the associated, whatever the name of the element is, / locales / name of the tag dot language in question dot JSON. And so by doing that, it's going to know to grab this and then update those variables. So the manager is basically just overriding what these variables values are based on the language changing in the whole document. Now to use those variables, you just use, in this case, what you do in the rest of lit element. So this is my render function, and I've put reveal down here in the text. So this area label on this icon button is just going to reveal what the answer is, but it's going to put that translated text. There's nothing implying it's a translation. It could literally ship anything on the other side. However, that little JSON blob makes it really easy to do a translation, right? It's just a string, replace this string with that string. And it's going to feel weird. That's literally all there is. That's all you have to do to get this to work. The mixin, if you're looking what the mixin is, isn't even doing that much. This is really just leveraging replacing objects and having those objects propagate down and update in the page what the variable should be. So you can see I have a mixin. The mixin is a super class, which means I can wrap it into existing classes. And in this case, I'm setting default. So T is set to nothing by default, which then your element has to supply it. Then I've got properties where I'm pulling in and making sure that we account for properties that exist, but I'm going to add in a T value. This way, when you use it in your lit element template, it can update the variable based on knowing that that's there and something it cares about. Then and we don't care about this path from URL, but register translation is the big deal, right? Because the only other thing going on in here is on connected callback, it's setting a temporary fallback variable to a copy of whatever you set that to. So the reason that this has to happen is if it needs to fall back to the original values, which is going to happen if you switch to a language that your element doesn't know about. It needs to make sure that we're still supplying, in this case, English being the default localization, that it's going to still give you English. So that way, if you go from like French to Spanish to Italian to English, that in between those hops, if your element doesn't support Italian, it shouldn't still be showing Spanish, even though it says we're on Italian now. It should fall back to whatever the default language is, which in this case is English. So register translation is where things actually happen. And really all it's doing is talking to that singleton element, and it's doing a little bit of normalization of the data to say, okay, well, what's the namespace of this? So a namespace would just be, I've got this tag, let me translate based on this tag name. So if you don't supply a namespace, but you don't have to for that, it's going to make one up. And it's going to get that from the tag name. Then we've got update callback. So update callback is what's going to be activated in the element after the variables have changed to ensure you see the change in question. Now, we cheat here a little bit and say if you don't supply one, and there's something called request update, which is in every lit element base class, then we're going to make that the update callback, meaning we'll update the variable, and then just to be safe, we're going to forcibly refresh the element so the variables are applied. Then another fallback, I say render. So if you don't supply this, it's going to pick one for you or attempt to. Render is very common in a lot of vanilla HTML elements. There's nothing saying it has to be render. It's just a pretty logical word to make. So if you don't use, if you want to use your own, and I do for some of them, then supply your own. What the manager's doing in this register translation is it is going to go through, make sure it hasn't been registered already, so that helps account for dual registration or something of an element. And then it's going to make sure it's got decent defaults, and then it's just going to push this into a list and say, hey, I care about this element. Neat. Then it's going to make sure that maybe this didn't load after the fact and we've already changed language. So it's going to execute update language. Now, this is just on initial. Imagine we're just loading the page. We know what the language is. Update language is going to fire. Now, everything that's checked in, all of our little elements implying that they care about translation, are in a list. And in this case, this is this.elements. So whenever update language fires, which is when the language changes, right? So in the little example, when I toggle the language, it's going to know which elements from those that have registered can be translated. Then it's also going to find the ones that can't be translated, because as I mentioned, that's a very important, if I go between different languages, I need to be able to fall back to the original. So make sure it has both these lists, things with this language and things without this language. The things without this language, it runs through and resets their .t value to be the original _t value. Then it fires the update callback, which makes sure that the element repaints and we get our nice happy DOM. For when we're on the other one, right? And this is what happens in the case of I go to Spanish and then I'll go to French. This element doesn't supply French translation, and therefore it falls back to English. It doesn't remain on Spanish. So this is the state management idea that we're talking about here, right? Similar if I go to Japanese, this knows Japanese, this one doesn't, so it just falls back. So now if we go down to, okay, so now we're in the process list. So these are the things that have a translation that matched. How do we handle those? So we just make sure that it actually has our localization, which it will, but we need to know if it's one of two ways. So the first is, does it match directly? Which would imply that it's a like thing stuff .es .es.json, right? So if the name of our tag was thing dash stuff, this is the language portion. But if that doesn't match, which is possible with like the UK variation that I showed in that example, that would be like en-uk. So it gotta match. It's going to attempt to match on the whole thing first. So it's going to try to match on en-uk, and there are localizations for other there's other dialects for other languages, I should say. So if it doesn't get an exact dialect match, it will try to fall back to the first piece of the language, right? So if you have variations of Japanese or of English, it's going to fall back to this language if that's supplied, as opposed to the dialect specific, regional specific language. So imagine we've got a reference now, right? Because I had locals path, which is the path to just /locals, locales. So then it's going to form the path to the element /locals / name of the element dot language in question dot JSON. Then it's going to see if we've already got this target. So if we already have this target, like maybe we've got 10 of this same tag on the page, it's going to make sure we only request one reference. So imagine this is for the other, if we've already got that, but let's say we don't. So what it does then is it's going to do a fetch, but we're awaiting the response. Fetch sets what's known as a promise, and a promise is something you never break. Again, it's Wednesday. Come on, Somebody's got to care. Somebody's got to care about these jokes. They're just buried here, lost forever. No, a promise is JavaScript saying, this is going to take a while. When it's done, I'll send it to you. I promise. However, it might not happen in the exact flow of execution. So this needs to happen in an async function. When I have this as async at the top of my function, that implies this must run in order. And when we see an await statement, it's not going to just keep going. It's going to actually wait for this section of code to finish, which is going to go load and request a JSON file. So it's going to go request a JSON file, parse it, and make sure it is valid JSON, and return it as JSON if it is. So then I have this as a variable to use. So it's going to then walk through that variable, which is going to be a little blob of JSON for, Japanese or whatever language. And then it's going to overwrite the different variables in my translation array. So el.context is going to be a reference to the element, and then .t, so that's the equivalent of like the this.t, and then whatever the name of the thing is, with whatever matched in the associated array. So if there's something you don't supply a translation for, it's not going to overwrite it. If it's something you don't apply a translation for, but it's in the translation file, it'll be available to you. Although that currently serves no purpose. But so what ends up happening, right? So we've got our integration with self-check. Self-check has these values. Then they're going to load from here automatically. So let's add in Espanol. So we are going to take locals, we'll add a file, and we're going to call it self-check.es.json. Then I'm going to take an existing one. We'll take actually the UK one just for fun. Okay, so I put this object in here, and then I'm going to change these values. So let's do reveal answer is the real one, and this says close. So I'm going to take reveal answer, and then I'm going to do this just for the purposes of what we're doing, because I don't know Spanish, right? And then I'm going to take close, and then I'm going to take more details. Okay, and I'm going to save. Now I need to fire up in our tooling to notice this change, because I did change something in self-check. I added ES. If you just make the file, but you don't indicate to the internationalization engine, hey, we support Spanish, it ain't gonna do anything. So I'm gonna go into self-check, and we'll run start. Okay, and so that's running in the background. Now, over in our element where we're doing this testing, right, we've got, let's close that. So we've got it set to Spanish. Let's make it English, right? So run in English, reveal answer. Now we go to Spanish, which word count accepts. Still just says close and reveal answer. I wonder what the issue is there. Let's see. So network self-check, English, French, English UK, it has that. Spanish, it has that. Or no, Spanish is not loading. Let's see if maybe that's in there. Self-check.js. Oh, it's not, it doesn't have my my changes reflected there. Let's restart the manager. Let's do yarn run build just to be safe. That'll recompile the element. Okay, and then we'll do yarn start on i18n manager. Let's see if that gets it. No, it still says reveal answer. I'm thinking this is a caching issue. I'm not entirely sure why it's not getting the new element. Let's see if I run it like that. Because it is claiming that self-check Spanish.js does not actually have that supplied there, and it absolutely does. So I'm not entirely sure why it's claiming it doesn't have that. You know what? It's not actually compiled there. Let's try that again. Self-check, yarn run build. Now it's in the compiled file. That was weird. Maybe I wasn't saving. Now it's in this file. And now it's loaded in here. All right, maybe I just wasn't saving. Hey. So now we've added support for Spanish into this element. And the elements are in charge of this. This is a fundamental difference from the other libraries reviewed in that article. Is now if I want to see what it takes to power the other ones involved, so like I have Meme Maker has translations, but Meme Maker is interfacing directly with HAX for its translation. And this also demonstrates a zero dependency integration, which is a little trippy. So instead of the mixin, I'm going to search for this function name, or sorry, this call. There we go. So if I wanted to translate tweets and a Twitter embed tag, or here it is better, that login camera in the original thing. So this, it should be a camera, but I can't make that do it and stream to you at the same time. So imagine there's a camera there. The way that gets its translations for Spanish is without a dependency. So there's no dependency in here on our internationalization engine, which I think is extremely appealing if you have your own way of doing internationalization that is not ours. So this doesn't have a dependency. The way it works, you have to then follow the convention. So I have this.t equals, right? And I've stored this.t's values just like the other one. And then I dispatch a custom event, which is to register this element with the manager. Now the manager has this event applied at the time that it's integrated. So this is a little dependent on your application or some other element making sure that's there. But then it's going to make the namespace automatically. It's going to calculate its own locals path, which it can do. It's going to say the update callback is render, so it has one automatically built in. And then it's going to say that the locations or locales it supports is ES. Now, in this, right, we have locale simple-login.es. An interesting thing about this is being registered from the simple login camera element. It's not the simple login element. So this approach also allows you to leverage the same namespace across elements. So you could have an application-y type of context in which multiple things are just using the exact same translation file. So what that looks like, because that is what's happening in HAX, is this. So I'm going to go to HAX, and let's fire up HAX body. So you're going to get a sneak peek of the new HAX editor as it's a work in progress. And by new HAX editor, I mean it's just the UX is improved. It's not like fundamentally new or anything. So the way that we interface, the way that HAX is interfacing with this, so it's using the mixin in a bunch of elements. And then it's actually got a deeper integration because it has a tricky edge case that it has to account for. But look, it's got close, right? So it has almost nothing. However, it's supplying the namespace of HAX and then the context and the base path as to where to find this file, and then saying, hey, we support Spanish and French, which I don't even think we support French in this. I think I haven't made the FR one yet. So let's get rid of that. So we just support Spanish so far. So now other things can register and say that they need to be translated in HAX. So, right, we've got HAX map. HAX map has this .t. It's got its things it cares about. And then it's only registering a context and a namespace. So the other aspect is already assumed because the store has made this longer form registration as to where this path is. So you can reuse a namespace. That's why the namespace is awesome. So just by doing that and applying the mixin now, I can mix this capability of translation across the entire HAX editing experience. Right, so whether that's in a tray, which the tray has a lot of of English text written and still needs more things updated, or whether it's in any aspect of the UI. So what you end up with is, well, we're already in Spanish because that's what I've defaulted the page to for testing. Here's the new HAX editing interface. So it's a lot cleaner. Nikki's done a phenomenal job with this, even in its current state. But you can see the entire thing is, well, not entire, the entire thing that I've translated so far is in Spanish. So all the way down to the HAX elements themselves. So now HAX elements can have their schema translated as well. This was the sticky edge case that I mentioned. So HAX is bubbling up these messages or reading them off of the elements, and it needs to be able to take that message and turn it into a piece of UI. So we need to be able to translate that piece of UI. So I can, and I've gotten a little obsessive with this. So if I drop in a meme and I'm in Spanish, it even changes what the default meme text should be because that's how I roll. So this is, I will bring you the death, but it's translated, at least using Google Translate. So this example was put in the page. However, the form fields and their descriptive text has been translated. Now, and these are all translated, that at least the initial one I think is translated, yeah, it's listed as separados. So multimedia, right? Muscar for search. All right, and then we've got these text things translated. Now I'm still going through and translating more parts of the UI. However, now we can actually and Nikki also has, you can do dark mode, which is cool, so I better do it. So you can go into dark mode. However, in addition to that, now we get the ability to change language. So I can change this to English, and it will go through and update all the parts of the UI to be English. So if I go over, there we go. Right, so I went to my element. Now, this obviously is not, because that's what the initial text added was. However, now, if I search for meme, see, it doesn't say memes, because I guess that's, I don't know, that's what it is in Spanish, at least as far as Google's concerned. But so now when I drop in meme, I get, I bring you the death instead of the translation. So all these pieces of the UI, busy translating, which translating, is more than just copy and paste into Google Translate. I'm not saying it's not, but I need at least something to work with at first so that I can wire everything up. So all these different parts of the UI, the ability to move the menu around, collapse it. I'm even getting into some of the tour. So the tour has been updated, right? And this now is translating this part of the tour, which now if I switch back over to English, hit take a tour, right? I get menu position. So there is a lot of text that needs translated. We'll definitely need to have people that are native speakers go through and actually write this the right way. I don't want this to just be like, I'm running Google Translate for you. The hard problem was actually how to do it, how to ship these as individual components, which is what the i18 manager solves. That's the biggest problem it solves. So if you want to learn more about HAX, you can hit the button that's in the new HAX UI and go to haxtheweb.org. There is also a full write-up on everything I talked about in this video. That's i18 in web components, or sorry, i18n in web components. And if you want to join us in our Slack group, you can go to bit.ly/hackslack and come in, ask any questions you need to, get involved with the community, hopefully help us translate some stuff. So if you have any question or critique or interest in internationalization, think there's a better way to do it, think how we could clean up and work on this project together, please feel free to reach out either in our issue queue, which is github.com/elmsln/issues. We have a dedicated queue because we have so many projects so that we can just work on issues across everything, or hit up that HAX Slack address that I mentioned. So with that, happy Wednesday, or whatever day it is you're watching.